Butler's new football coach, Butler's new women's basketball coach, and Bill Brooks, the editor of the Indy Urban Times, one-time downtown publication. Give us quite the look back and look forward. One to please put on your calendars, August 4th, by Zoom, we'll have Trip Mickle, who's a tech reporter for the New York Times. He's a best-selling author and is looking at Apple post Steve Jobs. We're going to get a large crowd for that. We have plenty coming up throughout the fall. I think we have 1 or 2 spots left for the remainder of the year. So, good stuff. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sorry for fumbling that.
Okay, let's see. We are very fortunate today to have our guest speaker, Mr. Trip Mickey. Is that
No,
No.
Chris Carron.
Oh, I'm sorry, Chris. I guess this is an announcement.
Big section on the back.
Wendy will announce it.
Wendy
wanted to do something.
Tell me again. Trina?
Oh, Wendy can take care of introducing.
Oh, excellent. Okay. Excellent. Thank you,
I
Wendy.
took up a lot of real estate with my phone line.
Hello. It is my pleasure to introduce Chris Carron to everyone. We go way back, 10 minutes, 20 minutes, but anyway, he worked in New Orleans for a while, and so we had a nice little bond over that. So let me tell you a little bit more about Chris. He is the Director of Collections for the Children's Museum of Indianapolis, the largest museum for families and children in the world. In this position, he directs a staff of 20 curators, collections managers, conservators, archivists, paleontologists, archaeologists, and lab technicians in the care and development of more than 130,000 artifacts and specimens, ranging from T-Rex skeletons to Willy Wonka's golden ticket. Chris has managed a variety of exhibition projects, including National Geographic Sacred Journeys, which utilize world-class religious artifacts to examine the planet's great religions, and American Pop, which features hundreds of pop culture toys, comic books, and movie props. In 2016, he and his paleontology staff began one of the largest Jurassic digs in the western United States. And the museum's exhibit team began planning for a major expansion of the Dinosphere galleries that just opened in March of this year. Before moving to Indiana, Chris served as Director of Collections and Director of Education and Public Programs for the Grand Rapids Public Museum for 24 years. In 2010, he received the Brookings Prize for Creativity in Museums from the American Alliance of Museums, developing an urban corporate diversity training adventure called The Grand Race. In Grand Rapids, he led the creation of numerous exhibitions, including Anishinaabe, The People of This Place.
Pretty good.
Thank you. Newcomers, The People of This Place, and Grand Rapids, the Furniture City. He also oversaw the management of a Victorian House Museum and National Historic Landmark, Hopewell Indian Mounds Group. Chris holds a BA in History, Art, and Museum Studies from Luther College in Iowa, and an MA in Historical Administration from Eastern Illinois University. During his career, he has also worked with museum collections at the Kentucky Library and Museum in Bowling Green, my favorite, the Louisiana State Museum in New Orleans.
Yeah.
Missouri,
from Louisiana.
Yeah. Missouri Historical Society and the Museum of Transportation in St. Louis. You see why he's such an interesting person. So happy to have him here as our guest speaker today. Come on up, Chris.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Again, I'm Chris Carron. I'm Director of Collections at the Children's Museum, and today I want to speak to you about a place that many of you maybe have visited before, Dinosphere at the Children's Museum. maybe with a child or a grandchild or with a visitor from out of town. I'd like to give you a little background on how that started and also tell you about how we've changed it. So first off, Dinosphere is one of the permanent experiences we offer at the Children's Museum for families and children. With more than 500,000 square feet and 29-acre campus, we are the largest children's museum in the world. And of course, you see before you ever enter the building that dinosaurs are really important here. I'm in charge of the stuff. So, as was already mentioned, we have a crew of about 20 who decide what should be in the collection, how we care for the collection, and how we use the collection. And that includes human-made objects called artifacts, those things that occur in nature, specimens, artworks, archival materials. So it's a really wide range. You know, if you're the Corning Museum of Glass, it's easy to figure out what you should collect, glass. If you're the Andy Warhol Museum, it's a no-brainer. But what does a children's museum collect? Most children's museums don't even have collections. And so we collect those things that inspire learning in families with children. And that can be really wide-ranging. It can be a race car, it can be a Barbie doll, or it can be a dinosaur. Now the original Dinosphere experience, planning began on that in the early 2000s when the decision was made that our Cinedome theater needed to be replaced. There were not many films being made for the Cinedome format, which is a projection on a domed theater surface, and that not many people were coming, and so the space was really being underutilized. And so they decided instead to turn the dome into a dinosaur exhibit. That opened in 2004, and that's the Dinosphere that many of you probably visited over the last 20 or so years. It included immersive environments to make you feel like you were in the Cretaceous period. It included real fossils collected by contractors as well as casts, and a lab window in a small paleo lab where kids could come up and talk to paleontologists about what they were prepping and actually touch a dinosaur bone. Dinosphere quickly became the most visited experience at the museum. More than 1 million people a year visit Dinosphere, and we regularly receive national and international acclaim for the Dinosphere experience. Here you see we're number 3 on Fodor's list of the best places in the world for dinosaurs. Now once we had the exhibit, we realized, well, we've got this paleo lab, we have to have some fossils to prep in it regularly. And we want to give a more deeper dive experience to kids. And so we began conducting family digs in South Dakota. And we dug up more Cretaceous dinosaur fossils so that we had enough fossils to prep at the window every year. And then we also took families and educators there where they could dig with us and help us find those fossils. Word of Dinosphere spread, and we heard from a private collector, John Lansendorf, who had amassed the world's largest collection of what's called paleo art. Now, paleo art is a great way that kid who may never be the scientist digging out in the field, but who might have an artistic eye, can also participate. If a scientist makes a new discovery, say that T-Rexes have feathers, they need an artist who can show what that looked like. And so this is really a great synthesis of science meets art. And so we created a gallery permanently devoted to paleo art that opened when Dinosphere opened and that utilizes the Lansendorf collection. Oops. In 2014, we hit the 10-year mark for Dinosphere. And so we brought together a summit of paleontologists, paleo artists, educators, even funders from around the world to say, all right, we've been doing this for 10 years. We've collected a lot of data from our visitors about what they want to see. How has the science changed? What are we missing? What aren't we telling and that we should be concentrating on? And so they helped us create a list. They suggested we expand the time frame from just the Cretaceous to also include the Jurassic, which is where we get those big long necks, the sauropods. That we look at not just what happened on the land, but also the sea and the air, that we talk about geologic time, and that we update our technology because it had all changed in 10 years, and that we make it more accessible. So we set out to start doing that. We realized if we wanted Jurassic dinosaurs, we needed a new dig site. And so we sent a team out to Wyoming. This is me kneeling next to a sauropod footprint on a ranch in Wyoming. We went to almost 20 different sites looking for the right place to dig. It had to be a ranch, private land, had to be a ranch where they were willing to lease and allow us to dig. It had to be accessible for families. We had to be able to welcome our research partners there. And we had to know that we were going to be able to find sauropods. Here's what we quickly nicknamed the Jurassic Mile because the site is so rich in north central Wyoming, just south of the Montana border, where we have a square mile and a 20-year lease to dig Jurassic dinosaurs. We also engaged some experts from around the world, our paleontologists in residence, Professor Phil Manning from the University of Manchester, and Dr. Victoria Edgerton, who is now our Eli Lilly and Company Extraordinary Scientist in Residence. She helped us to develop our Lilly Girls and Young Women in STEM program. And they come help us dig, help us determine the species of the dinosaurs, and also help us to develop partnerships. And these are some of our partner institutions who come to our dig site and help us dig each summer. The Natural History Museum in London, which is the place where the term dinosaur was first used. University of Manchester in England, where Phil and Victoria bring students from each year. And Naturalis in Leiden, which is one of the largest natural history museums in Europe. And so they bring their paleontologists to our site, help us dig, and then in turn, we will be providing fossils to some of those museums.
So where is Leiden?
Leiden is in the Netherlands.
Okay.
So we resumed the family dig trips to Wyoming, but we found that the dirt was not conducive for families to dig. The matrix is just too hard. So they come and they visit, they see the dig happening, and then they visit other sites in the area, but they don't dig. So we're working on that. In 2019, we engaged Research Casting International, which is a company based in Ontario that articulates and installs dinosaurs. That's what they do. And they do it all over the world. They helped with the structural engineering. How do you suspend a dinosaur's neck 28 feet in the air and make sure that both the fossils and the visitors are safe. They helped us with casting and molding and worked with us through the whole process. Now, digging during a pandemic was something they never taught us in grad school. And there were all kinds of barriers to overcome. I think we may have been the only major dig site in the West that was open in 2020. Because there wasn't a vaccine yet, people couldn't travel. There's only 16 ICU beds in the entire state of Wyoming. So there were issues like what happens if somebody gets sick. So we had to come up with all kinds of new protocols pre-vaccine for how we could continue on that timetable for opening in 2022. 2021, if you remember last year, there was horrible droughts in the West and wildfires everywhere. And so we had to monitor air every day to see which days they could go out and dig and which days they had to stay in the ranch because it wasn't safe to go out. We had to put together emergency egress routes in case one was blocked by fires. So a whole new set of policies and protocols. This year, if you've been watching the news, you've seen the flooding in Yellowstone. Well, that's about an hour from our dig site. And so every excavator and bobcat and bulldozer in a 4 or 5 hour radius is booked. And so we had real difficulty getting the usual equipment that we need at our dig site to pull sometimes 18,000 pound blocks of stone out of the ground and put them on flatbed trucks. But despite pandemics, floods, fires, labor issues, supply chain problems, we managed to open on time in March of 2022. And as you can see, people were ready to come out from the pandemic, and it was the perfect time when people were excited for their first chance to get out in public and see the museum again. Now, the reinstallation of Dinosphere includes the old favorites, Bucky the T-Rex and the Stan the Triceratops, and some of those that people have literally grown up with. But we also had to deinstall all those fossils during construction. We had to clean, inspect, repair every bone, put them all back up after construction was over, so they're bright and shiny. We changed the technology so that it uses modern equipment, and it's a lot more fantastic than it was before. We created new areas as well, like Giants of the Jurassic. This is where we show you the two 65-foot long sauropods, the long necks, that we dug out of the ground in Wyoming. One is rearing 28 feet high, so you can have an opportunity to see just that amazing scale of dinosaurs. And then we had commissioned brand new murals that surround those, that show you what our site would have been like when those dinosaurs were alive 150 million years ago. We also created several sound and light shows, and an live actor interpreter show, and those feature American Sign Language and closed captioning so that everybody can participate. We also opened Monsters of the Mesozoic Seas. We wanted to show you what the creatures were like under the surface of the water. And this includes a Baptanodon, which is a dolphin-like reptile that swam in the sea at our site in Wyoming, which is now a very arid place, but at the time was covered by the ocean. Suspended elasmosaur and turtles, and interactives where you can create your own Mesozoic monster. In 2020, we received a grant from the Institute of Museum and Library Services, it's a federal granting agency, to study and investigate how we can make Dinosphere more accessible. So we worked with local and national experts on all forms of accessibility. We prototyped with audiences, and then we added things like QR codes with visual descriptions, and special sculptures like the one you see there that allows people who can't actually see our dinosaur to feel our dinosaur. And so everything about the new installation is about accessibility, but what you often find is if you make it better for some people, you really make it better for everybody. And so everybody appreciates being able to feel the dinosaur or to feel along how long it is. And it makes the experience better for everyone. We tripled the size of our prep lab. We realized that Cretaceous bones were this big and Jurassic bones were this big. And so we needed whole new hydraulic tables and pneumatic tools just to be able to prep those. So we had to triple the size of the lab. So there's an area where we still work on the big bones, and then there's that same window that's always open for that experience for the next generation of scientists, for the kid to come up, often to share how much they know about dinosaurs with our scientists, but to be able to also ask questions of somebody who's been out there in the field digging up dinosaur bones. We redid the Dinosphere Art Lab as well. Rather than just showing you art made about dinosaurs, it's now much more interactive. And so there's opportunities for children to learn how paleo artists make decisions. For instance, how do they decide what color a dinosaur should be? And then the kids can decide on their own color. They can draw their dinosaur, they can scan it in, and then it gets animated, projected up on the wall, and it walks around with everybody else's dinosaur. So this went from being one of the quietest areas of the museum to one of the longest stay times of any of our experiences. We also focused on commissioning new art, and we concentrated on young artists, local artists, women artists, artists of color, so that no matter who you were visiting the museum, you'd see artists made by somebody who looks like you. And the digging continues. This photograph was taken Saturday. And what you're seeing is a series of articulated bones, meaning they're still connected, from an allosaur, which is the Jurassic precursor of a T-Rex, so a meat eater. And we're currently working on that. The folks from Naturalis just got out there. And this year we're focusing on that allosaur. We're focusing on learning more about the stratigraphy, what are the layers, and how do we better date those. We're looking for that area where new family digs can happen, where kids can actually put a shovel in the ground again and find a dinosaur bone. And then we're working for the third year in a row with the BBC, who's creating a documentary about the Jurassic Mile. So that's a quick introduction to how we got involved in dinosaurs, how we've changed the site over time, and really how important it's become as both a learning tool for people from Indianapolis and an attractor for tourists from all over the country to Indianapolis. So, any questions? Yes?
Okay. Well, Chris, did I see that 40 to 50% of what's on display?
The sauropod, those two sauropods.
Okay, it's fossil?
Is
real
actual fossil, yeah.
Because I was always skeptical, like, how
Yeah.
authentic can this be?
We try and be as upfront as we can about what's fossil and what's cast. It's rare that you find a dinosaur that's 100%. We have one out, which is Leonardo. It's called a mummified dinosaur, and it fell into the mud, it got covered really fast, and so there's still muscles, tendons. It's even been scanned to see its stomach contents. But the number of those you can put on one hand. What's more typical is you find just parts of a dinosaur. You know, the famous Sioux at the Field Museum, only a small percentage of that is actual fossil. And then what they do is they fill in with casts from real dinosaurs, but from other specimens. So for our sauropods that we have out, both of those are 45 to 50% fossil. While they're digging out there this summer, they're still finding bones that might go to our sauropods. But then working with RCI, who installs everybody's dinosaur all over the world, they're easily able to work with Harvard or with other museums that have the same species, so that we can say we need a 7th and a 10th vertebrae, and for a juvenile or for an adult, and then they're able to provide those to fill in. And then other museums come to us to do the same. Yes, sir?
So why this location? Why is it that you find it here and not other places?
A couple of reasons. One, this was all never destroyed by glaciers. So areas that were glaciated, a lot of that just got churned up and disappeared. Part of it is because the West is so arid right now, the wind and water erosion makes it easier to get to these stratus and find where the dinosaur bones are. And partly because what this area was 150 million years ago was a unique location where there was land right at the edge of an inlet of the ocean, so that dinosaurs were right by the water, and we could dig water specimens and land specimens both in the same place.
So are you high up in the Rocky Mountains? Right
We're
there?
in the Bighorn Mountains. So high elevation, but really arid. On a big ranch, it takes 45 minutes to drive from where we enter the ranch to where we're actually at the dig site. Big open territory.
But it's mountains.
It's mountain desert, high plateau country. Yes.
When you were talking about solving so many problems during COVID
Right.
and with climate change, so do you, that costs money? Do you get grants? Do you have a
Yeah.
benefactor? Do you,
The redo of Dinosphere was a $20 million project. Monies came from every level of funding, from private individuals, from the federal government, from foundations, from corporations. And so that includes paying for our 20-year lease, paying for digging each year, paying for expansion of the lab, paying for all of that exhibit work. So yeah, it costs money. But 96% of our visitors go to Dinosphere. And so it's an important draw to the museum, an important draw from surrounding states.
thank you.
Yes.
Do you know how many other museums do digs like this?
Universities and museums, there may be a couple of dozen in the country. Children's museums, you know, we're the only one that's doing this sort of thing on this scale. At the height of the dig in 2019, we probably had 100 people out at the dig site from England, Netherlands, and United States and Canada. So there aren't many digs that are on that scale, but there are, you know, there's a dig that's less than an hour away from us, and we collaborate with them and talk about how's the weather over there, is the fire getting close? So we actually know the folks that are in that dig site. But through Utah, Montana, Wyoming, South Dakota, Colorado, you know, there's probably 24 dig sites that are actively going on this scale. Yes.
It says you're in your third year of the BBC documentary filming.
Right.
And I wondered what's the target for release of the documentary, and
I wish I could tell you. That all got derailed by the pandemic because they couldn't travel over here for 2 years. And so we started filming in 2018 and 2019, and then couldn't film in 2020 and 2021. So they're coming to complete it now. So I don't know what that does to the release date, but they'll be there for a couple of weeks in later July. Yes?
When and where was the first mostly intact or close to intact dinosaur found?
Well, Leonardo is the one we have, excuse me, is one of them. We leased that from a museum in Malta, Montana. There's another so-called mummified dinosaur that was being shipped across the Atlantic and got dumped into the water, so it's at the bottom of the sea. So there are very few of these so-called mummified dinosaurs where you can see skin impressions and scale impressions. What they're finding is, as they locate more of them, they realize that paleontologists have been brushing aside what they now realize is tissue and scales all along just to get to the bones. because they didn't know what they were seeing. And so they're learning from these few mummified dinosaurs and finding there are really a lot more than they thought. Yes, sir.
Appreciate your being here.
Yes.
I first saw collections, I thought you were gonna help us collect our food.
Different kind of collection.
But this is much more interesting. Tying on to Bill's question, how do you find when you're looking for a site to lease? Are you just looking at those areas you're talking about by the rivers?
A couple of different ways, and some are really interesting. Our team spent a lot of time going to the saloons in little towns in Wyoming. And of course, they were the outsiders, so they were immediately recognized by all the ranchers who very quickly asked what they were doing there. And when they said they were looking for a ranch that they wanted to lease for dinosaur digging, inevitably somebody would say, well, you ought to come out to my ranch tomorrow. I'll show you where we found a fill in the blank. So a lot of it was simply by word of mouth, being in the right place. There are also really interesting ways that paleontologists use to find dinosaur bones. One of those is ant hills. For some reason that they're still studying, ants like fire ants like to collect the shards of bone and take them down into their hills. They think it helps something with temperature regulation in the hill. And so while it's not good to disturb a fire ant hill,
I know that.
a lot of times they'll go and they will disturb a fire ant hill and see if there's bone shards in it, because if they are, they know that this is a good place to put a shovel. Sometimes dinosaur bones get exposed by erosion, so we know what strata is the right period of time. So it's this dark rock between these two light rocks.
Yeah.
So if that dark rock strata is exposed, you can just simply look for bones that are a different coloration than the matrix, and you begin to find dinosaur bones.
So how
Well,
many
if those
years-
ranches are as big as you're saying, they probably don't know what they've got on their own lands, do
Sometimes they don't. Sometimes they've known for years
they? Okay.
that, oh yeah, there's a big skeleton up on the ranch, up the ridge. I'll take you up there, and it's just been an open secret,
Good,
So
thank you.
how many years ago that you're looking at there, that you're?
Jurassic period is about 150 million years old. Cretaceous is much more recent, 60 to 90 million years old. So the dome area.
Both of them have dinosaurs.
Yes,
Okay.
yes, but different species. T-Rex is Cretaceous, not Jurassic, despite what the movie says. Long necks are mostly Jurassic, not Cretaceous. So in terms of the three dinosaurs our kids really wanted to see, they wanted to see T-Rex, we had that in Cretaceous. They wanted to see Triceratops, we had that in Cretaceous. They wanted to see long necks, we didn't have that. So we took the cue from our audiences of what do kids really want to see, what will inspire them to learn more, and that was sauropods. And so we went in search of them and found them.
Piggyback on that.
Yeah.
What's a misconception or misunderstanding that you'd like us to correct?
Well, don't believe everything you see on Jurassic Park. We're delighted at the interest that it instills in people to learn more about the past, to understand science. But the science they use is fishy. We've got a lot of amber in the collection. We have a lot of bugs inclusion amber, so that part's true, but you can't take DNA from it. Amber is already turned to mineral, which means anything organic is gone.
They're in their final state.
Right. So, understanding the difference between science fiction and reality, it's a fascinating concept. Could we bring them back to life? I mean, there's a lot of talk about that now as they're finding things like mastodons that are being unfrozen in Canada and Russia. It's a lot more possible that they could take DNA from those. But then you get into the ethical questions of should you?
Yeah.
So it was a fascinating science fiction exercise of Michael Crichton, but it's it's created misinformation in a whole generation of kids and now adults. Yes.
So is your nickname Indiana Jones?
My chief paleontologist, Dr. Jennifer Anay, goes by Indy.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
I want to commend you on the great work you do there as far as the
Thank you.
rotating exhibits and the permanent exhibits. They're such a great asset to the community, not only for locals, but also for visitors to come here. My son actually went to preschool there. He's now 14.
Yes.
And then our 10-year-old, we have a family membership, and he has it marked on his calendar the Saturday every month where we can go early as a family.
Right.
And so I'll pass along the question I heard from him recently. How accurate are the depictions of dinosaurs? How high confidence level do we have that they actually look like what we see? Or do they take
That's
some
the job of the
artistic
paleo artist. But I will tell you, they change as science changes. We've got great depictions of T-Rexes from a century ago. And if you remember, Walt Disney's Fantasia and things like that, they're kind of fat and lumbering and slow. Well, if you're an apex predator, you're probably not fat and lumbering and slow. And so as science learns more, the depiction changes. So the more recent T-Rexes are much more slender, muscular, and fast. And then more and more now they're finding feathers with dinosaurs in China particularly. And so we're realizing all theropods are really birds. And were probably feathered, at least all or in part. And so the most recent depictions are showing what these theropods, T-Rexes, allosaurs, look like with feathers. So the art changes as the science changes. Yes?
Favorite dinosaur and why?
It's like picking your child.
Yeah.
Someone asked this.
We have, at the Children's Museum, we have two what are called type specimens, meaning they were the first one that was used to name a brand new species. One is a Prenoceratops, the other is my favorite, the Dracorex hogwartsia. And we discovered it.
Say that one more time.
We got to name it. Dracorex, so King of the Dragons, Hogwartsia, from Hogwarts. So we're a children's museum, and so it's a fitting name. And it looks like a dragon. And we were the first to identify it as a new species. It was a cover of National Geographic about 15 years ago. And that's my hands down favorite.
How much work is it to identify that it's the first?
Well, it's like, is Pluto a planet or not? It's an ongoing process. You identify something, you publish that you believe it's a new species, and then there's that rigorous scientific discussion that goes on of, is it really a new species or is it just an aberration of an existing species? And sometimes, Brontosaurus has been a species and then it wasn't a species and now it's a species again. And so that process keeps changing as science learns more and they find new specimens as well. Yes?
Have the remains of dinosaurs been found all over the world, or are they more situated in certain sections?
In many parts of the world, yeah. There's lots of digs going on in England and Portugal and Morocco. China and Mongolia are really rich locations for dinosaurs. Western United States, but there are also discoveries being made on the East Coast as well.
Is that latitude kind of the prime? Like for Wyoming?
Not always, because the plate tectonics move over time. Things like we have a cast of a super croc, a really big crocodilian, and those mostly come from Central Africa. And it's simply, that's where they're found. Over time, we may find that they were in other locations. Thank you all, great questions, and thanks for listening.
Stay up here a second,
All right,
please.
yes.
Not to be bossy.
That was fascinating. That's one of my favorite sections of the museum as well. As a thank you from our club, we are going to make a donation in your honor to Indiana Youth Group. This is a group that creates safer spaces to encourage community and provide programming that empowers LGBTQ and plus youth and magnifies their voices.
That's fantastic, thank you.
And sort of to remind you of your visit with us, we are presenting you with a certificate of appreciation.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you all.
Thanks everybody for coming. This was really a fun program, and I thank Kelly and
This was all Kelly's doing.
and Wendy and for making this possible. This is an institution in Indianapolis, and I've always heard that we are the best of the best anywhere. So, and you have been a part of that, and we're so happy to have met you and to have heard your, taken advantage of your expertise. Thank you. Good week to everyone, and we'll see one another in 2 weeks, is that it?
2 weeks.
Okay. Thanks,
Put that on
everybody.
the calendar.